All right, we're going to show you how to draw the back of the cabinet. A lot of students get um, confused with this one. It is going to be just like the front of the project, except for having an 1.5-inch face frame on the front. It's like we take the face frame off and just see the plywood that would be behind the face frame. So I'm going to move this over a little bit to a new part of my plan so we can see that. I'm going to take my pencil tool just like before, and I'm going to click and pull it the direction I want to go. We're going to use the same outside dimensions. So looking over here at the right side of the screen, you can see we have 12 by 28-inch project. So I'm going to pull it over. My pencil's going to be red there. The line's red. I'm going to type 12. I'm going to go 28 inches tall. And back over 12 and connect the dots. Okay. I can also put the top on there so we have that. We can see it 1.5 overhang up 0.875. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Off 1.5 inches, up 7/8, and connect the dots together. There's my top. So what I meant about the face frame being gone and seeing the inside, we're going to be building with 3/4-inch plywood. So I'm going to zoom into this. I'm going to take the zoom window and I'm going to draw a little box around this. That's what I want to zoom into and make that bigger on my screen. So I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to come around and type 0.75 and come around and just draw my lines in. 0.75. Find my end node, pull it down. I'm going to come down 0.75, find my end node, pull it over. And there's nothing in the middle because that's a drawer. But I'm going to come down here. And if I look over on the right side of the page here, I can see my size is 4.5 for that bottom rail. We're actually going to set the edge of that shelf down about 1/16 of an inch, so that when we are done, there's just a little tiny lip there. We don't want to have any chance of plywood core material being seen over the top. So because this is going to be a finished project inside, we're going to actually come back later and router off that extra. So right now, putting 1/16 of an inch doesn't affect the project too much. But 4.5 minus 1/16 is 4 7/16. So I'm going to click here at the bottom. I'm going to come up 4 space 7 divided by 16, and that is going to be the top of my shelf. And this also needs to be 3/4 thick, so 0.75, because that's how thick all of our plywood is on the back. So this would be kind of what you would see on the back of the project. If we were to turn this around, we would see these plywood. We're not done quite yet. What we need to do is put our joints in here. We're going to add Dados and Rabbets. You may need to zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little bit closer. And we're going to take the pencil tool again. I'm going to come in. Now, typically a dado is half the thickness of the material. So I'm going to come in 3/8 on a 3/4-inch material. I'm going to come down. You can see that red or this intersecting line here tells me when I'm straight over from it. You can see that appear. So I don't have to sit and draw multiple lines. So that's my dado into there. I need to get rid of this middle line. So I'm going to use the eraser and come in and just get rid of that. So there is my shelf that is dadoed into the workpiece. Okay, if you hit the zoom with the 4 arrows, it's going to show you everything, both drawings. You could do that, or you could slowly zoom out to the view you want. Now that I'm way out here, the easiest way to get zoomed in again is the zoom window and draw a box around what you want to see. Now I need to do the same thing up here, but these are going to be rabbets because they're on the end of this board. So a rabbet is the same as a dado. It's in 3/8 of an inch. It's the same depth in, not necessarily the same, because a rabbet's on the edge, a dado is in the middle of a board. We're going to pull over this one, 3/8 of an inch, and connect that up to the top. And come in and clean this up. Get rid of those extra lines. It's a little bit difficult with this big cursor I have turned on. to get precisely on those lines. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit again so I can do this last shelf here and come in 3/8 of an inch again. 3 divided by 8 and down 0.75 and back over. And then I can take my eraser and erase that little line going through there. Now I want to see the whole project here. And we need to start dimensioning this. So as I look at this, I'm going to get my dimension tool, which was the 3 at an angle. And this time, not only do I want to know what the inside size is, I also want to know what the shelf size or the dado size is all the way in there. We could do the math and say, well, 10.5 plus 3/8 and 3/8 is 11.25. We could do that. Now, we do have some dimension lines that are overlapping right here. The 10.5 should be inside the 11.25. Just to simplify things or keep it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, we're going to move these around so that the bigger size is on the outer side. That way, we are not left with lines crossing that don't need to be. Okay, so I've got that shelf marked. The one down here should be the exact same. I don't need to do that again. All right, the wood grain on here would actually be plywood layers, and it's going to be so small you're not going to be able to see the details. You don't need to worry about putting the wood grain on this view. The wood grain mainly is to help you cut the pieces, especially the plywood pieces, the right direction so you don't have grain running the wrong way. So the last thing we can draw on here is our feet or our trim, and what they would look like from here is they're going to stick out about 7/8 of an inch, 0.875, maybe 3/4, somewhere in there, 7/8 to 3/4. I'm going to draw it up because it's 3 inches. That's how big my standard trim on this is going to be. I'm going to come out again, 0.875 and up 3 inches. Now this project is going to be designed to be against the wall, so I'm not going to necessarily have a line connected across here because I don't need to put that piece of trim all the way across the back when it's going to be against the wall. Nobody's ever going to see it. If this was going to be out in the middle of the room, we would need to do a little bit different design so it looked nice on all 4 sides. We wouldn't want to see this joinery and things like that when it's all done. All right, you could, if you wanted to, paint that end grain there. I'm not going to say you have to. You can see the grains off a little bit. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. Let's make that a 15-inch. Even that's a little too big. Let's go 3-inch. There we go. That looks better. I'll close that and paint bucket that one. So there is our end grain of solid lumber. This is going to be solid lumber, and these are our end grain. Now, the only other thing we really need to add, besides some more dimensions here, we want to make sure that we have that at 4 7/16 so that we have that a 1/16 smaller when we run the dados on the table saw. Put our dimension of your feet so we know how big those are. You could have this on this view since we don't have it on this view yet. And just to verify that our plans are the same on the front and the back, those measurements should all line up. All right, the thing that we need to add are some little blocks of wood. They're going to look almost like this trim here. And those are going to be for the drawer slides to mount on. So they're going to have to build out the plywood so that the piece of wood would be flush here. So if this is 1.5 inches, these are going to stick out about 3/4 of an inch. And we're going to be, the bottom edge of the piece of wood is going to be here at the top edge of this line. So this line right here is the bottom edge of our piece of wood. So if I figure out 6 inches plus 1.5 inches, that's 7.5. So I'm going to take my pencil tool and I'm going to come down 7.5. Actually, I'm going to start right in the middle I'm going to come down 7.5 and just draw a line across. You can see when I've connected those lines, it then filled it in blue. Not a big deal. I know you deleted it once. If you want to delete it again, you can do that. It might fill it in every time that you cover something up. So this line and this top line are the exact same location. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come out 3/4 of an inch, 0.75. Now this piece of wood is going to be 2.5, 3 inches tall, somewhere in there. That gives you room to mount the drawer slide on the side. And the reason we're drawing this in the plans is so that we can account for that material in our cost estimation. If we didn't have these on the plans, may forget to add them, may not remember that piece of wood. Okay, so I can delete that again. Now what I'm going to do is just put some dimensions on here so we know how big we're making that. Control click or right click to kick that out of there. Again, if you want to add the end grain, we would technically see solid lumber here. I feel like solid lumber holds screws a little bit better than the plywood, but solid lumber, so we would see the end grain like that. All right, these up here on top, we're going to be using cleats or 3-inch strips of wood, so we don't have to have a whole big bottom, and we'll talk about that as we're building the project. This piece up here, there's 2 of them, one at the back of the project, one at the front of the project, and these give our box structure so that it can keep its shape. And it also allows us to screw from the bottom up into the top to secure that solid top. So these cleats give the box shape and give us some screwing material into the top. So that would be our back view. Looks pretty good. I think we're pretty much done there with that part. Happy drawing. We could also add some labeling. Remember, we use the A1 tool up here for our labeling. I can just say what these are. Drawer slide support. You could label some other things. You could say down here, we're going to have a dado for backing. Okay, you can't see that on this view, but you could just make note of it. So as someone is looking at these plans, they say, oh, there's going to be a dado for the backing. All right, hopefully that helps. Happy drawing.